Happy Thursday, happy Thursday. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Erudition Network Interactive Black History and Knowledge Q&A session. My name is Eddie Phillips. I am the founder of Erudition Network. Erudition is dedicated to teaching Black history and providing knowledge and understanding of our people on history that has been hidden from us. We are on every Thursday live to interact with you on issues and things that come up in our current situation as African Americans, as Americans, I should just say, and our historical past. Um, One of our tenets here is to present you with history with an honest perspective, devoid of um, exaggerations and misunderstanding. Um, this episode here is our episode. Just excuse me about that. I hear that noise in the background, but give it a moment, trying to center that out. But what we try to do, let's see what that is to provide you with history. This is our episode just before um, Black History Month. And it's also an interesting episode because it marks basically the a year, almost officially a year, just about, um, short of maybe 2 days, that Erudition has been a functional organization that provides information as far for Black history. Um, Gonna give a couple of more minutes to get people to get in here live. Sometimes I know it's hard to keep up people coming in from work on Thursday evening, but we really like to make this program as interactive as possible, and not just me on here for an hour speaking to the void. Um, and so we really want you to interact, ask questions um, as we go through the topics that we talk about on this show. So I want to give a moment to see if we have anyone that is coming on. You know, one of the things about doing a live program is that a lot of times it's we run into the issue of different individuals coming on and you know trying to interrupt the program, and we've been running into some issues with that. Um, and I wanted to make sure that I apologized for anything that that you may have seen over the year on this program. We've had some situations and some incidents. You know, we do the show live. I'm at home. I have 4 kids and a wife, so there's always things that are going on, and so we try to mitigate as much as we can. But unfortunately, there are things that do happen. Recently, we had someone this year because of what we were doing, try to get us knocked off the air for a while. There's been a lot of different things that have happened over this year as far as erudition. So we try to keep the faith, keep it moving, um, and keep everybody interested in what it is that we're doing. All right, so we got about 3 people on here, so I'm gonna go forth tonight. Um, this is going to be a little bit of a different episode tonight because I am going to touch on some history, but predominantly tonight I'm going to speak to you all out there. You know, we have done this program for a year, as I said earlier, and I am always proud, of what we are able to accomplish on Erudition. And when I started out to do this, I did it as a commandment. It was something that I felt that God had put in me to get done, um, that had to happen. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about that. Something that had to happen, but it's important, and so it has been a challenge. Um, and I wanted to touch on the fact of that. We want to grow, and I try very hard to keep this session as professional and as interactive and as challenging as possible. A lot of research goes into some of the things that we've covered over the last year. A lot of things that we talk about are straight to the point, and they are things that we as a people, as a culture, but Black culture specifically, need to be aware of. and a lot of us are not. Um, and I think that a lot of times history is boring. I know that. I have said that on many occasions, on many an episode, but it is so important for us to get a full understanding. It was boring when we were in school because every year they taught us the same thing, the same people, the same repetitive things over and over and over and over again. And what happens with people is that once you start learning a certain history, you shut down. And then there's an arrogance, right? That comes with it too. Over this past week, I've had different discussions with different people, different teachers, educators, different folks online, folks that I respect and I know. And what happens is people start to shut down. And they start in two ways. They either say, I've heard this before, or they're arrogant enough to tell themselves that they don't need to know. And we run into that with this program a lot. And what I wanted to talk about tonight is the fact of what we need to know. Because knowing these things will help us to grow. And I wanted to kind of do this as like, in the 80s, they used to do these old programs where people would go in and they would revisit, right? They would revisit these situations where people would go back and talk about the other episodes. And I wanted to do that also. I wanted to talk about some of the things that we have done over this last year. But more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a little frustrated tonight, and I hope that it does not come off as anger. We are in some historically challenging times. I cannot put it to you more clearly than that. The things that we have been able to accomplish, that our ancestors were able to accomplish for the past 50 years or more, are slowly being dwindled down. We had an issue of people wanting to talk about Black history. And then we had folks coin it with CRT, and that was nefarious because the idea of CRT was never about the idea specifically of teaching Black history. See, as I have said many times before, CRT is a principle that is used in the law. And it was done because we needed to investigate and understand where we were going in this country. And so a lot of people over the last year walked around screaming and hollering CRT in the schools and saying that we were trying to teach things to make whites look bad. But very few even read a book about CRT. Very few knew who Derek Bill was. Very few understood any of the critical race theory components and what they actually involve. The same happened recently when I was talking about Dr. King's principles, and many of us don't know them. We don't know them. And yet every week, I tried very hard to get on Erudition and give you those historical points, principles, ideals, things that I know were not shared in regular school. I know that. Sean Anthony, this became less of a learning experience and more about memorizing. Yes. And trying to get you but see, memorization is a thing. We do quizzes and things for erudition, right? We do them on purpose so that we can, quizzes and tests and trivia should tell you, they're an identifier of what you may not know. And more importantly, what you know. If you come up to something and you go, man, I know that, but I didn't know that part. Maybe it's something in the quiz. It sounds like this person, but I didn't know that. It's just a cue. It's to cue you. Hey, Pastor Razor, thank you for being on with us. And so I try every week that I get on Erudition to do this, to give you this. You know, we are at a point right now where they're trying to pull back affirmative action, where they're trying to they're not trying, where they're hindering the ability for people of color to vote. We are at a place right now where lynchings, quite literally lynchings, are happening in our neighborhoods and streets, where crime is everywhere. An epidemic of self-harm and suicidal ideations and suicides are sweeping across the country. And every time for the last year, that's what this episode's about tonight. If you watch the repeat, we struggle every week to try to get people to come on and interact. And I pray heavily. I say, God, do they not see what's going on? Ladies and gentlemen, there are people out here that I connect with, Black historians, teachers, who charge you to get some of the information that we have been provided, that we have researched and given on Erudition for a year, and we will continue to do. I have friends that say, man, why don't you charge these people for this? You do some seminars, some forums. But I get on here every Thursday because that was what I was told to do. That is what everything that I learned, what the purpose of it was. My brother came on during the Dr. King Black History, or I should say Dr. King's birthday forum that we had. And we were talking about Black history. My brother made a point because he was in the Army. I was in the Navy. But he'd been all over the world. And he's like, Eddie, they don't even understand that people over in these other lands, they know their history. They know it. They don't know if they're going to eat tomorrow, but they can trace their generations. And we sit over here eating, enjoying America to some component, some capacity. But when I bring up Black historical figures to people, when we have discussions about lynchings, situations, violations of the law, when we take it a Thursday to talk about voting rights, when we take a Thursday to talk about CRT, when we sit down and try to get interactive and tell people what has happened and how that plays into where we are right now, people ignore it. And it's so frustrating because I have been trying, even with my kids, to stress to them the importance of our history. The importance. You know, we were talking about, everybody got so excited about Juneteenth this year. And they made it a holiday, and they quickly made it a holiday, and everybody got excited, celebratory about Juneteenth. And we took that day and came on four, to speak with different ages, my wife and my kids. We did that so that we could actually discuss, not just be a day of random celebration, discuss what this was and how it plays into today. We did those things so that we could learn. And we tried to provide you with the understanding, those who watched, those who actually participated, right? We came on the next week, that Thursday, because those were recorded. We came on next week and we discussed it with young people. We did all of this because we understood the purpose and the point. The purpose and the point. You know, they tell you, I told you that Joseph Goebbels said, if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such a time or for a period as the state can shield the people from the truth. And that is what happens in our education and our teaching. People have been told these lies. This is why when we talked about Tulsa, right, we found that a lot of people didn't know. Pastor Ray said, I found that Native Americans know more about our history than we do. I have some conversations with them, and they literally wiped me out with, yes, they know their history. I sat down with a Native American friend of mine, and we had a discussion. He talked about how his grandparents and his parents had been basically civilized, taken off the reservations, moved to places where they had programs that supported them, put into schools. And I had a conversation with him, and I told him, I said, you know, my first school, before like preschool, I remember. And I said, my mother sent me to preschool. It was down the street. And it was a Latino and Native American preschool. I had Native Americans and Latinos in there. Right. And I learned to understand, right, what they just the difference. And then when my first couple of years of school, we all went to school together. They left out of preschool. We went to the school down the street, right? So I knew how folks treated us. I told a story on here how the white teacher that we had, white female teacher that we had in first grade, and I always ask myself, Lord, why do you let me remember these things? My teacher had the idea in her mind that I couldn't read. But it wasn't just me. It was also the other kids. They gave us books, and she would sit us over on the side and tell us and people would draw and they wouldn't read. She'd get mad if they spoke in their language. And I didn't understand this. So I went along with my friends. I just played and I did what I was supposed to do in the class. But when it came down to be able to move further in school, she told my mother, he can't even read. Not knowing that my mother had made sure that I could read, even before I walked up in that school. Not knowing that I always had a book on me. But to show you the conditioning that affects the mind of young children and why we stress so much on erudition about our young people. When I sat there, right, with Miss Tandy, I never forgot her name. That woman sat there with my mother, and she told my mother I could not read. And my mother, my young mother, said, no, that's not true. And she pulled that purse strap, and she told me, yeah, you read. And I sat there and I read. It took that to break that conditioning in my mind. Now, if you have a parent who is not involved like that, that conditioning can affect you for a very long time, if not the rest of your elementary career, going into your high school career. I tell people often, how does it make you feel when you walk into a room and they pull out one of these history books and they say to you, okay, This is American history. And they go through Joseph Smith, they talk through all of the founding fathers. And by the time you see anybody that looks like you, they in bonds. They're being sold. They're being called less than. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, that is what our kids deal with and schools still deal with. But getting back to my subject of the night, we try to do something on here to change that. We have been up against a comprehensive, well thought out attempt to condition and program us. This is why this show, Pastor, as I try so hard, I'm more frustrated tonight because when I talk to young people and I hear from them, we've been trying to get a show together to talk to young people and have come on. The disenfranchisement, the idea that, well, what will I say? I sat down with my sons the other day and I asked them the question. I said, how many times have you experienced racism in your life? And initially, one of them was like, I can't really say. I'm pretty blessed that I haven't really experienced racism. And my wife had to sit down there and tell my son, she was like, no, that ain't true. When they told you that you couldn't, you weren't smart enough, or you are behind, or when the teacher lied and said that she gave you schoolwork, my son was out had an asthma attack. And the teacher told us that my son had not done his work before he left. He was sticking it in the back of his she had cleaned his desk out and she found his schoolwork stuck in the back of his desk. And me being in the military, I come up and I'm mad. I come home. And I said, you got to get all this work done. And I give him the work. He's sitting there getting over dealing with asthma. And he goes, Dad, I did this work. And then he starts pulling me out the papers that were the same papers. So I say, okay, I'm going back to your school. So I go back up to his school. I talk to the teacher. She goes, oh, I had the wrong kid. There's a woman who teaches all them kids every day. And so then my question was, if he had done these papers, you had graded them, why you didn't put it in your grade book? Because all you would have to do is go to the grade book and say, okay, I can tell that Eddie did all of this. That's third grade. I told people on here, we had a session on Thursday, one Thursday, earlier part of last year, where we talked about the fifth grade dropout mentality of Black young men. We talked about how they get to about fourth and fifth grade. And after the kindergarten and preschool of singing and dancing and feeling interactive with the teacher, and now and actually a lot of them coming in reading at the 80th percentile, dropping down to 10 and 20. People say, well, why is that? Because they're being told when you start getting into your history, you become disenfranchised. When everything you do in school seems to warp itself around the idea of you being less than, you being something else. I was blessed, didn't realize it, that when I went through school, I had African-American teachers. Because I went to school coming out of the civil rights era. And people went to school. They got their degrees and they became teachers. I had Black men, Black women. And I thrived in them classes. I had a teacher, Miss Mitchell, Miss Gibson, Mr. Perry. And I can go on and on and on and on. Teachers who gave me a sense that education had value. And I'm on here tonight because it's frustrating. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we see what is shared from Erudition. We see it. I got people who share every week. They watch, they share. And I get the feedback. And then I got folks who I don't know why, but they refuse. And it's so important right now. So important right now. If they find this has happened, an African-American young man hanging from a tree today, the police, in the last 5 cases of this happening, all dictated to be a suicide. Even though all evidence to the kind suggests something else. Everybody was saying it ain't nothing to do with us when them people ran up there on January 6th. But ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a question. During the Civil War, when this nation was fully engaged in battle and war, there were people in the Confederacy that came into Washington, we know that, but they didn't do an uprising. Why is that? But we are at a point right now where American citizens, angry, falsely educated, because see, this education that is given in these books, ladies and gentlemen, goes 2 ways. It disenfranchises our African-American children, and it emboldens the racist. It makes them feel that this is their America. And they don't want nobody to know about the mass graves in Arkansas, Georgia, Mississippi, Texas. They've taught us to appreciate some of the most crazy things out here. For years, I ran out there with everybody else. The Alamo, the Alamo, the Alamo. Not realizing that them settlers went down there because they wanted to keep slaves. And they didn't want to come back up because they wanted to be able to push slavery. Not realizing that the people who we were celebrating, right? Folks running up here telling you, give me liberty or give me death, slave owners, right? Folks telling you that we want to form a perfect union. Folks telling you that all men were created equal. And each one of those men did the opposite. And history won't tell you unless we force them to tell you. Last week, we talked about voting rights. And we talked about how unfortunate it is that we are now going back and having to revisit all of these things. And I tried to give you, because there's a lot to unpack in one episode, the history of it. I tried to give you an understanding as to why it's important to be on that, to know who you're voting for. But nothing. We get out there on TikTok. We get out there on Instagram. We want us to learn. And I ain't charging you for it. That's important, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to learn. Your learning to me is more important than any pennies, dimes, quarters, dollars, or whatever. I sat here about a week ago and I was programming into Alexa the Erudition quizzes. And I put them there because I was like, you know what? I want people to be able to reach this worldwide. And then I started doing the things with Google to try to get us an app on Google Play. And every quiz I ever give, I always try to make sure that I give you information after, because that's more important to me. I could care less about the right or wrong. I want you to learn. And as I was on there, I just started to get to a point I was like, I'm trying. And I guess that's the biggest thing. I'm trying. All last year, I was trying. I'm trying. This year, my focus is different. That's the reason I wanted to do this show tonight, and I wanted to get on here and talk about some of these things that we've touched upon. My focus this year is on young people. When we first started Erudition, I asked folks, I said, bring your young kids on, let them watch. That's why I started this program earlier saying, I apologize for anything that may have been shown or seen that we went back and edited out as we were learning this whole new medium. But one of the things that I want to do this year, we're going to teach our young people. And we're going to continue that fight. I say we because I can't do anything without my family. They have been a great support with me. They shut down the house for an hour whenever I come on. We try so hard to teach because we understand that it's important. Yes, very important. And that's the thing. I appreciate you, Daniel. You have been with us too. You come on, you interact. The frustration of Erudition faces a lot is that there is so much out here. I remember saying at one point, maybe halfway through last year, that there are people who are hungry for history, who are hungry for knowledge. But the problem is when you're hungry, when you are starving for something, you'll eat anything. And one of the things that we try to do is to vet and validate the things that I go over. I try to make sure that there is some reference, something there that you can go back and read on your own. I'm constantly trying to give somebody a book, a place, a passage, a documentary, a movie, whatever is going to spur your interest. That's what I try to do. You know, so much has happened in this country. We know, I think it was maybe around the middle part of the year, we did a episode where we talked about the KKK. Very often people say KKK as if the KKK is just one entity. But it's not one entity. It's not. It's everywhere. The Ku Klux Klan made a comment, one of the Grand Dragons made a comment back in the 90s in which he said, we are teaching people white supremacy in every aspect of life, job, school. And groups knew it. The NAACP put out things to tell people about it. But if I ask people about the Klan, the birth of the Klan, we specifically went over that this past year. We gave you all of the births of the first through the third Klan. We told you when they were born. So you knew from 1865 to 1871 that first Klan and why they were born. Then we went and we told you about the second Klan, right? And we told you from 1915 to 1944, 45, and what their purpose was. Then we told you about the third rising of the Klan that came up during the Civil Rights Movement from 1945 to basically now. And how they understood how to stay active, how to stay relevant, how they got into the police departments. When we talk about the police throughout the country. When we talk about the laws, the statutes that are placed in some of these small towns, they still have laws on the books that are not sundown town laws per se, but go against vagrancy. And vagrancy basically meaning, why are you here? So when you hear that police officer on YouTube before a shooting or before somebody gets assaulted, what are you doing here? Because the vagrancy laws that are on the books, right, that were created by these white groups to keep you redlined and broken out and not in their area, we gave you books. We told you where to go read it. So you didn't just have to hear me talk about it. People want leadership. Mr. President, in the absence of genuine leadership, they listen to anyone who steps up to the microphone. They want leadership. They're so thirsty for it, they'll crawl through the desert toward a mirage. And when they discover there's no water, they'll drink the sand. So true, my son. I try to give you stories. I remember as a young man, I was cutting class with a friend of mine. And when I say cutting class, we left toward the last period because there were some pretty girls who used to hang out at this video arcade. So we left early because we knew those girls would be up there by the time we got there. And we went over to the north side off of Belmont, I think it was, of Chicago. And we went over there. And we got over there. We were going over to the arcade. I can laugh at this now because I couldn't laugh at it then. And school was out. By the time we got over there, school was out, right? This was about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And as we walked, we were just getting, I think, about 5 steps from the arcade. A police car pulled up and asked us, "What are y'all doing over here?" We were like, "We're going to the video arcade." He's like, "You supposed to be in school." He's like, "School's out, sir." Right? And the man told, the 2 officers got out of the car and told us both to get in. Now, I was with my boy Thomas, the big dude. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what we did. And I'm scared. I'm a young 15-year-old kid. And they put cuffs on me, put me in a car. Thomas told him no, he wasn't going to get in. And that cop took his stick and hit my 15-year-old friend in the side. And then once they bodied him, they put handcuffs and put us both in the car. They drove over towards an alley. True story. And that cop came and opened the door and he told us that if I let you out right now, I could take the handcuffs off of you right now. And I could shoot you before you get out this alley. And everybody would believe that I wasn't right in doing it. That's a cop told me that. That taught me, that educated me. And at that point, I was like, okay, we ain't coming back over here. And it wasn't for years that I understood what the motivation was. The motivation wasn't that the school was out. The motivation was that we were over in a generally populated white part of town at that time, going into an arcade that was full of white kids, white girls. And they didn't want us there. We are living in worse times than that. We are living in times where somebody can't even go run through a neighborhood without somebody blowing you away. We're living at a time, we talked to you about this, of people being able to walk into somebody's house, a person of color's house, and blow them away. See, you stick your head out of a window to see who's in your backyard and blow you away. This is what we live. This is what we're in right now. And so when I talk to my sons, right, and I try to talk to young people of all cultures, so that they understand what we're dealing with in this country, where we're going. This is why erudition is important. This is why it is so important to me that I get on here every Thursday to talk to you. You know, people talk about the Central Park Five. They talk about how those young men went through. They talk about the tragedy of the misjustice of that. But all they would have to go back and look at is the Scottsboro Boys, the Martinville Seven, and numerous cases that are so hidden in our society that people don't even know. I remember sitting here this past year telling my sons about the People's Grocery race riots, where 3 men were savagely killed, shot in the face and the hands. And what had they done? They simply defended their property and defended the life of a young black boy who was playing marbles. That's how it started. I talked about all of these lynchings and all of these horrible things that happened because we are still in a country that sees you as something less. We talked about the 1863 draft riots. When people talk about who's patriotic in this country, and they throw that patriot out there as if it's something freely to give. And then you think about how many former slaves, people who have been beaten, hurt, destroyed, separated from their families, who went to go fight for this country. And 1863 draft riots is important to me because it just shows you in New York City how history is why it's so important. Because when you saw the rise of the Irish people in New York, who killed maybe 2,000 to 2,500 blacks, men, women, and children, and that the United States, in the midst of a war against slavery, had to go and turn arms against people in the North, not the South. And then we say, well, how can people show up screaming and hollering and protesting? We talked to you about Jesse Washington in Waco, Texas. Before the time of movies and radio really was fashionable, showed up by word of mouth and telegram to lynch a black man for hours. Took pictures of it, had parties and celebrated it. We talked to you about Ida B. Wells and how important her life was. She's not just a name on a project in Chicago. We told you why she was important. And I didn't charge you $25, $30 to do it. I got on here and taught you and gave you the red record and showed you what books to get. We are not in competition with anybody. I give you that knowledge freely because that is what God blessed me with. I went out for years to study. I try so hard to make people understand. I don't expect you to be a historian, but I expect you to understand who you are. And I'm not just talking about black people. I'm saying I want you to know who you are as a people, as Americans in this nation. Why do you have the right to vote? What had to happen for that to be available? I want you to understand how many compromises and negotiations went in to just allow Black people to live in this country. The other day, I had my son sitting here watching the movie Outlaw Josie Wells. And we were all right, Daniel, see you later. And we were talking, they give a lot of names in that movie. Even though Josie was a Confederate fighter. But they give names to show you what was going on during those times between Missouri and Kansas. And understanding how slavery had started to separate this country. We covered that. We talked to you about bleeding Kansas. We talked to you about the rebels coming into Missouri, killing men, women, and children of all colors. We talked to you. We gave you that information. I did an episode where we went through so many areas of lynching. And people say, Eddie, you spend a lot of time talking about lynching because we don't talk about it. We don't talk about it. And it frustrated me as I was sitting here watching people talk about Tulsa as if that was the only thing. And everybody was so focused on Tulsa. And Tulsa was horrible. But they didn't talk about New York, Memphis, New Orleans. They didn't talk about Yoakum. They didn't talk about Atlanta. They didn't talk about Springfield. They didn't talk about Vicksburg. They didn't talk about Appaloosas. This is before 1919. This is before Red Summer. They didn't talk about the year upon year of racial anger, murder, harassment that ancestors went through. They didn't talk about that. They didn't talk to you about any of that. We looked at Tulsa if it was an isolated situation. But they killed people in East St. Louis. They killed people in Washington, D.C., Chicago, Lane, Arkansas, Rosewood. This happened everywhere. So what's my point tonight? Why am I out here bloviating tonight? Because I'm at a point where I'm looking at where we're going to go next year. Next week, we start Black History Month. And though I love Carter G. Woodson as an educator, as a writer, as an ancestor, as somebody, right, who tried to encourage and to incite this idea of knowing who we are. At the same time, I'm hunted with the idea. I'm hunted by the idea that we don't take this seriously. And so I have to keep pushing. I have to keep pushing. And I am motivated to do it. Do not get that wrong. But I have to call it for what I see it. I told my son, I'm not in competition with anybody. Every time you see us on this program, I always say, try to join us live or watch the replay when you got time. I'm sure there are many programs that you can watch, many things that you can learn. But what I do believe is that we are at a point where we better learn who we are. We better go back. We better start looking at our Bibles. We better start appreciating and understanding how we got here. I wear many hats. Sometimes I wear the hat of a historian, public historian, and I'm fine with that. Sometimes I'll wear that scientific hat that comes from my analytical mind and my analytical training, and I'll talk to you about science and different things. And sometimes I'm just going to talk to you as a man coming in you and let you understand as a human being that we got to do better. This is a knowledge session as well as a Black history session. And we are on here every Thursday to provide you with knowledge. If you ask me a question I can't answer, I don't have no problem in telling you, I don't know that. Let's go look at that together. I'm not God. I'm not all knowing. I'm not all seeing. But what I do know is that I want this network to grow. I want to reach those people that need to be reached. And I need you all's help in order to do it. And I wanted to talk tonight about those things that we've already covered. You know, my mother told me at the beginning of all of this, she's like, everybody can't, they don't know all this stuff. And so you got to walk it, right? And I have, and I continue to do that. But I want you to understand that erudition is not just something that we get up and we talk and we just throw things out there to you. Everything that we cover, there is proof and evidence, validated historical significance. And we do that because we want you to learn what you haven't been taught. What you haven't been taught. Black, white, brown, yellow, white, doesn't matter to us. There's a reason why people don't want you to learn this knowledge. There's a reason why we are here in 2022 and people are still fighting the idea of somebody saying anything about Black history, because Black history is American history. And in that interlacing of that history is a stratified situation that they don't want you to know, that few want to talk about. We're going to get on here every Thursday going into this new year. This is officially going into the first year of what we've been on here to do. And I'm so proud of it. If you missed an episode, go back. But we're going to go forward to try to teach our young people, to try to inspire and encourage them to simply know who they are. And I'm going to continue to do it, whether I see 3 people on it, 4 people on it, 1 person on here, 0. Because that's what my commandment is to do and what I'm going to do. But I am also going to let you know, you can go get history somewhere else. You can go learn about Africanism. You can go learn about the mythology of Africanism. And people can lie to you and give you theory about what they believe Black history is, teach you about Anubis and all this other stuff. But in the end of the day, what do you know about your journey, your ancestors? Maybe you're from Mississippi. Maybe your ancestors came out of South Carolina and were brought down to the South. Mine is hugely in Mississippi, because I research and study not only generously, but even my own. I know about the horrors that my ancestors went through. I know that my great-grandfather was killed because he bought a brand new truck. I know that my dad's mother had issues taking him out of the South because he looked like a white baby. That's my personal, internal history. And then when I lace that on top of, or I overlay that on top of the history of this nation, then I'm reminded that we all play a part. We all are significant. So I get ready to go off here. We're coming down into this hour. We have a program that we're going to be kicking off. Many things are going to be happening during Black History Month. But one of the major things I'm very proud of, my sons are going to be holding a youth forum on the 12th on Saturday the 12th. And we are trying to get young people. We're trying to get young people to get involved. If you know a young person that wants to talk about their journey in this country. Because we need to understand these kids are dealing with things at a different level than us. Yeah, I went through mine, you went through yours, but they experienced racism. And what I try to tell my sons, don't normalize it. The normalcy of racism is an unfortunate part of American society. And the reason why laws and things get repealed and taken back and different situations get taken from us is because we've normalized the idea of how we feel we should be treated. We've conditioned ourselves to accept it. And that starts with the young. Dr. King understood that. Malcolm understood that. Garvey understood that. Carter G. Woodson understood it. W.B. Du Bois understood it. And on and on and on and on and on. Frederick Douglass understood it. We have to be better. We have to be smarter. And we have to go together in this journey. Please encourage. You will see advertisements on our Facebook page, and I will put one on YouTube to try to get people to join in. Get your kids, get your cousins, your nephews, your nieces. Let's start this conversation, because they will not be able to feel connected. Sometimes racism makes you feel so isolated, alone. Bigotry tears you down, and you come home. There's no more pain than seeing your son come home saying the police stopped him for absolutely no reason. Or your daughter saying somebody said something to her because she was black, or you were pretty black, and they said something aggressive to her. This is a reality of our society that unfortunately a lot of us, as we get older, we normalize it too and tell them, well, we're going to have a talk with you. We need to have that talk, but we also need to let them speak. So on the 12th, they will be doing this youth forum. I will be in the background. I'm not going to be on to say much, but I want them to be able to host that and to talk to their peers and encourage them to be able to speak out, feel included, especially as we go through this. There's a horrible, horrible depression going on through this country. Suicide is rampant. Depression is real. Anxiety is real. Thank you, Pastor Reyes. I know you are doing some extraordinary work on your side too, and I appreciate your support. I ordered my book. Where do we go from here? I am looking forward to next month of Erudition, Biblically Black, Blessed Man Up, educating people in the more. Yes, so much going on. My brothers on the Man Up show, they're tackling the issues too. We're all trying. We're trying. Pastor Razor, get that book, Biblically Black and Blessed. Order that book on Amazon. We have to know who we are. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Sister Jada, for coming on and reminding me of all of that. And I look forward to seeing you all. All right. Until next week, you all have a blessed and wonderful rest of your week and a great weekend. And we will see you here next Thursday on Erudition. Have a good one.